So I'm gonna move really fast. I guess I thought I had a little more time, but that's all right. So I'm gonna keep an eye on the time here, and yeah, move as quickly as humanly possible. Let me switch out of the presenter mode. Cool. So I'm going to show you guys some cool stuff. This is basically the secrets of pre-seed funding, pitch hacks, resources, guides. Yeah, all that good stuff. You guys can read. All right, a little bit about me. Thank you for the intro. One of the new things I'd like to go over. I just launched Near Nordic. It's a Web3 accelerator. I've been working with Near Protocol for close to like 6 months, and it's finally come together. So if you want to check me out on LinkedIn or you want to go to nearnordic.com, super excited to get that thing off the ground. Crazy, crazy good stuff. Cool. Some of the things that I've done, I've scaled these 4 companies to exits. So basically, I was either the chief marketing officer, or the leader of marketing, or the person kind of calling shots. And I set up a ton of automation led teams. And basically, that resulted in 1 IPO, 2 acquisitions, and 1 merger from a little place called Copenhagen, Denmark. Again, originally from the Washington, D.C. area, but decided to make my life out here. So I run Clint. It's a digital marketing and growth hacking company. It's been a ton of fun, and I love working with small, medium, and large organizations. I've worked with pretty much everything in between, and that's kind of what my regular day job is. I run growthsecrets.org as well, and that's my online masterclass. So if you like what you see here and want more of the technical growth stuff, then feel free to check out growthsecrets.org. I work with shitloads of accelerators. I love working with startups. It's kind of my passion. And if you can't tell that out of my presentation, um, you'll get a feel for it pretty soon. But if you're a part of an accelerator and are interested in having me, I am all about it, all about that life. So my goal for today is provide value. I am going to move fast. Normally, I would do a little bit of interaction, but because I'm talking into a box. I have no idea who's here. Connect with me on LinkedIn. We can jam out. I'm the only Taylor Ryan on in Denmark, so go me. All right, so first I'm going to hit some theory stuff because I think theory is like really important to kind of get where everybody's coming from. There is absolutely no one size fits all for pitching, for courting investors. You're going to find that everything that I say today has the opposite being true of somebody else who's also credible. And there's so many contradictions, especially when it comes to pitching hacks, because it's not a perfect science. This isn't data driven like conversion rate optimization. This is how do I get money? And I only really need one. But remember the place that I'm coming from. If it feels like I'm shitting on founders or startups at all, I'm not. I'm a founder and a startup junkie and entrepreneur just the same. I've also done a little bit of angel investing myself. Cool. So first thing is get out of default mode. Default mode is robotic thinking. It often happens when people are either trying to build stuff from scratch or just running into barriers and saying, oh, can't be done. So I often try to figure out where do proven processes live, and that can be found with a little fancy tool called Google. So you can look up most anything, use guides and templates to save tons of time. One of my favorite theories is isostatic adjustment, which is basically there is no such thing as a triangular or cube planet because they don't exist in the wild. So if you are building a complete pitch deck from absolute zero, you are wasting your time and you need to go back to the drawing board, figure out who's already drawn it for you. And I'll show you some examples and where to find that stuff. Before you compare to what good looks like, you need to understand what good looks like. A lot of people are like, well, that's the pitch deck of Uber. And it's like, bruh, that was in 2008. We're not in that era anymore. And if you're looking back on Facebook's pitch decks, we're talking 20 years ago. Don't copy stuff that's irrelevant. Cool. Where do we find good stuff? Well, if you connect with me on LinkedIn and you don't run a marketing agency, you're in luck. I will give this entire presentation to you in PDF format, which has a lot of information from Y Combinator, 500 startups, some Sequoia stuff. Like it's all linked throughout this thing. So if you want this, just connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to give it over to you. Please stop building entire pitch decks without having never seen a pitch deck. So like I see this stuff all the time and it's like, it's crazy. Like you don't have to do that. So do a Google search, or if you get my pitch deck, like these are all linked, like 1,200 startup presentations. You could see what a real startup pitch deck looks like rather than just being like, I'm going to guess this is what it's supposed to be. Again, I've pulled a lot of the different resources from different places. You can too. Some of my favorites are Y Combinator and 500 Startups. Cool. So mental prep. If there are any investors in the crowd, you will love me after this. I'm kidding. You'll probably hate me. So you need to change your mind immediately about investors. These are bullshit artists and charlatans. So the average investor has zero experience within the startup scene. It is slightly higher in the US, but 92% of UK VCs have never worked in a startup as an employee, as a founder, as a sole contributor, as an executor. They are none of the things that you are, and that is really quite perplexing, to be totally honest. Investors are impatient, busy, older by nature. They're very self grandiose. They're very familiar with what pitch decks do look like. And investors are not the following things. They're definitely not technical for almost 99% of the investors I've ever met. They've never been sole contributors. Again, 99% of the investors I've ever met. They are not, for the most part, familiar with your industry and jargon. And for, I would say, yeah, I've never met an investor that's like kind of in desperate circumstances. They don't understand what a startup founder's life is. So don't assume that that's the case. These are some of the ridiculous reasons that investors have said no. And I've sat on stage with these guys and they were laughing about it like a bunch of fucking schmucks. You cannot tell startup founders that you said no because somebody was 10 seconds late to the call or even a minute late, or your pitch went 10 seconds time where it's like, bah, his dreams are shattered. I'm not investing. It's like, dude, who are you? It's so crazy to start to sit with these people and realize like, this is how you feel. This is how you think. These are real people that have gotten so distant from what it actually takes to build a startup like you are, that they don't really have any understanding of how much work goes into what you've spent years out of your life building. So, a little food for thought. I was pitching one of my startups back in 2016 or 17. And yeah, I was sitting across from investors at a event called Arctic 15. Awesome event if you're ever out in the Nordics. And I could tell that the gentleman's eyes were glazing over that I was pitching to. And I'm like, is something wrong? And he's like, yeah, it's just, it's like a lot of words. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I mean, it's my pitch deck. It's what I'm using. Like, if I put it on the back of a fucking cereal box, would you read it then? And he's like, yeah. Do you have that version? It's like, so like these people don't read, which is shocking. And keep it keep it straight. Like realize that you are cattle to these people. You are a potential investment, nothing more. They want to make money off of you. That's why you exist in their world. So they are required to be there to review this. And basically, you need to realize that what you're preparing to show them is not a sales pitch. It's not a marketing pitch. It's not a school project. It is a very simple document called a pitch deck. So I think of it a lot like dating. I haven't been in the dating world in many years, but it's kind of like the way that you go to a first date and people might have different intentions. So the investor might be thinking, is this somebody I can marry with and grow old with? And maybe the startup is like, I just need it right now. So like maybe this is someone I can go home with. And if you're not thinking of this relationship the way that they are, you're not going to get through the door. It's just not going to happen. So investors are actually evaluating, do I understand the idea? Do I get excited by it? Do I like the team? And it's like, dude, what do you even know about teams? And are you different? Like he's so different. You have to bear in mind that that's what they're looking for. Understand the job of the investor. So Anderson Horowitz or Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most well-known venture capital firms in the world, the average amount of startup decks that they get per year is 4,000. That's crazy, right? And so the number of startups that are reviewed that come mostly inbound are 3,000. And of those, if you were to divide 50 weeks per year by 5 days a week, you're looking at 12 startups to be reviewed per day. And they've launched some pretty amazing projects. Hey, look, the good news is like there are thousands of investors. You only need one. That's what gets you the momentum. So if you screw up your chances, like and people don't get you, it's not the end of the world. You're going to have plenty of other chances to impress other people. Every no gets you closer to a yes, and there are eventually great stories that later end in success after you've gone through a bunch of, yeah, these no's. It's part of the jam. Like, we're all there. So one of the most important things is fighting against the nerves. I've found that a lot of people get super shaky and crazy nervous up front. I get tunnel vision myself, where I kind of lose the colors and I just get kind of laser focused for the first 30 seconds and then I loosen up. But you're not alone. And by the way, most people are super nervous just the same way, whether or not they show it or not. Tell yourself I'm excited instead of I'm nervous. And I always try to be the first or the last because that's what people remember. They never remember people in between. The more practice you do, the better you get, honestly. And you could wake me up in a drunken stupor at 3 in the morning. I would be able to do my pitch deck backwards and forwards because I've done it so many times backwards and forwards. So, some quick considerations for anybody that's a founder that's listening right now. If you've ever hired anybody and you've gotten a lot of resumes, like, you're gonna realize that it's very similar to what they're looking at pitch decks. The investors are. So, like, the average recruiter spends 7.4 seconds reviewing resumes. Like, that's crazy. So if you get 100 applications, maybe the first few you're actually like reading, like, okay, yeah, we went to a good school. Okay, the first job was at a gas station, but they're progressing. By the time you reach resume number 98, it's a glance, and realize that these people are looking at pitch decks every day. So as soon as you start noticing things that are wrong, you're just throwing it out completely, where it's like, bah, wrong format of the resume, out. Or, oh, they weren't working in the last 6 months, out. These are things that they're starting to do with your pitch decks, which reminds me of riders within contracts. And Van Halen has one of the most famous ones. A rider is like a little addendum or an extra spot within the contract that says, this is an absolute requirement. If you do not provide this one thing, we get paid in full and we're out. So the rider within the Van Halen contract, and some people may have heard of this before, they required in the green room, which is before you go on stage. It's like where all the couches are and you're chilling, you're being a rock star. They're like, we want a giant bowl of M&Ms, but no brown M&Ms, absolutely no brown ones. If there was a single brown M&M in there, they would cancel the show and get paid in full on the spot. The reason they did that was because invariably, this was like the 80s, by the way. So they would know for a fact that, cool, you guys probably have screwed up the amplifiers and the electrical. They're bringing in their own trusses, their own pyrotechnics. Invariably, somebody could get hurt with that kind of stuff. If you screw up something super small, like just my M&Ms, you're probably going to screw up everything else. They look at your pitch deck the same way. So if you're screwing up these little things, and I'll show you what not to screw up, it's the same deal. The average VC reviews a pitch deck for a total of 1:35 to 4 minutes and 10 seconds max. There's a video that I've linked in here of this guy basically explaining it. On the low end, like, you're looking at like 1:35, 1:36. In order to impress somebody, you better do a good job. So, story time. I was on a judge panel for a pretty big prize. It was for 50,000 euros. And I was to review 160 AI and 100 logistics startups. And these were from all over Europe. And I basically had 5 different areas to score. There were only 5 judges. I was one of the 5. And they had to submit an explainer video, pitch deck, executive summary, 10 basic questions, and then include the website and the URL media links. And so I'm thinking, like, this is amazing. Like, this is my chance to be the investor or the judge that I never got. And the math that I worked out was cool. So if I only spent 3 minutes for each of these, it'd be 13 hours. So 20 hours later, I was only about a third of the way there, and I was trying to review these things. And I caught myself being that douchey investor that I never wanted to become or never wanted to be in that world, which was, I was mad at incomplete submissions, or it's like, you sent me a broken link to your homepage. Like, what are you guys doing? Or your pitch deck was in Vietnamese and you guys are based in Lithuania. Like, what's going on? Or there was just miles of text where it's like, yo, but who's going to read that? I have to read that. And so, like, I was like, oh my God, like, that's, now the tables have turned and I get it. And I think we could all probably relate to doing the same thing with like resumes. So getting more pitches is easy. That's not the hard part. It's getting a nice pitch deck. But if you do need to get more pitches, great. Go on Unoodle, Crunchbase, Angel.co. There's tons of different regional, local, and global startup demo days, pitch events, competitions. Like, it's just a matter of registering. Like, there are literally dozens on a weekly basis. It's crazy. And if you're looking for pitch decks, like, my God, it's so easy. Get on LinkedIn, do a quick Google search. Um, enter the, I'll have to do it later. I'll enter like how to do it. Type SITE colon and then docs.google.com slash and then investors, pitch decks, whatever. You'll find literally thousands. It's not hard to find investor lists. Here's how you scale it up pretty quickly. I've created a couple of different multi-use master answer sheets. After you've applied to like 4 or 5 accelerators or 1 to 2 of these kind of investor, like here are, the questions that we need you to answer before we can evaluate whether or not we want to talk to you. Most people are asking the same thing. So if you answer, again, 4 or 5 of them, you're pretty much capable of then copying and pasting everything. It's super easy to just get an intern or a virtual assistant to do that. And honestly, that's how I got so many pitches at scale. I do think it's important to read the requirements, especially for the big ones. Like if you're going for Y Combinator, they have like a number of blog posts where it's like, please just read the directions. Like, why aren't you reading? And they say they turn away half the people because they clearly didn't read the directions. So I get it. This is not a numbers game as much as one would think when you're going after some of the most well-known accelerators, if that's what you're aiming for. There are lots of easy ways to get in touch with these people, but here's how the process goes. So you're basically sending this out to the investor, they review. Then you set a first pitch meeting where you pitch and discuss an analyst who's probably your little brother's age or even younger, where it's like, bro, how do you even have a job? This is crazy. You're 19 and you're an analyst for a VC. And it's like, well, yeah, but last week I was delivering pizzas. Now I'm, a venture capital analyst. Fucking hate those guys. Then you have a second pitch meeting, at which case you meet with partners and stakeholders. This is like, hey, is daddy home? And you finally get to meet dad. And then after that, you'll end up doing a review and due diligence. I told you investors would love this part of the presentation. And then you close and sign the deal. Cool. So investor outreach, I'm not going to go into super deep detail, but you can scale this up just as easy as anything else. Everything comes down to a fluid process, just like you can see on the right side in the GIFs. There's no like stutter step or fast twitch. It's just fluid. So we target, discover, email, validate, and run outreach. Here are a quick like overview of targeting. So we have different investors in different spaces. A hardware investor more than likely will not invest in a software company. You have to figure out where these people are, and there's different varieties of investors, and you guys can read. I'm going to move on. Then we want to find the emails. I use Apollo. I think it's probably my favorite tool, but there's plenty of data enrichment tools that allow you to find anybody's email. But because the great resignation as was referred to earlier, a lot of people are leaving their jobs. Ergo, we need to make sure that the emails are still valid. I probably lean more into Clear Out, but Never Bounce is a great tool as well. So now we have a valid list of emails. If you're going to be doing this at scale with anywhere from 80 to 100 outreaches a day, you need to have a burner domain that redirects. I'm not going to go into that, but that's something you can Google search. And then I do sequenced outreach. All of these are great outreach tools. Everybody has their favorites. I'm more of a Snovio guy, but some people like Lemlist. Just depends. If you're early and never done any type of mail merges before, maybe Mixmax is your game or GMAS. Cool. How to write a cold email. This is one of my favorite presentations. Michael Siebel does an awesome job of basically saying, if it takes me more than 1 minute to actually read and comprehend what it is that you're trying to convey to me, like you want to pitch me, it takes me more than a minute to understand your problem, your solution, the progress and growth, market size, co-founders, technical staff, and your unfair advantage, then I'm not going to respond, which is really kind of strange and frustrating, especially from the standpoint of a startup, but I digress. Cool. So let's go into the actual deck itself. And I am cognizant of time, so I think I got another 15, 20 minutes. I'm going to go fast. Let's see how far I get. Feel free to jump in, guys, when I'm running out of time, or give me like a heads up when I'm down to like 3 or 4 minutes, and then I can pause for questions. So, big question. Have you read every sentence so far? Probably not. The reason for that is I put way too many words and way too many distracting things into my presentation. It's not necessarily a bad thing because I want these to be a standalone, but that's not what the expectation of you as somebody that's looking at my presentation wants to see. And honestly, I don't blame you for zoning out if that was the case during this presentation. I moved too quickly. But the reality is, if you're trying to pitch investors, you need to keep your slides as minimal as possible. which means you are stripping out every extra adjective, adverb. Like there shouldn't be complete sentences. Simple, legible, clear. That's what we're going for. Most people can't take themselves out of the equation, and I understand it. I have the same issue when I've spent, like, we're talking years, blood, sweat, and tears, nights and weekends, no friends, no fucking awesome times at the bar with, friends, family, whatever, no anything, no vacation. Then I want like everything of myself to be in this presentation. And the problem is that doesn't meet the expectations of who we're presenting it to. It's for investors, not for us to show off or not for us to convey what we really think it's about. It's how do I put it in words that you understand? Mr. I've never done anything in the startup scene yet. Somehow I get to hold the keys to the bank. Crazy. So we want to avoid ambiguity, complexity, mystery, and jargon. Jargon, especially because these people don't know any of the buzzwords that you've been dealing with on a daily basis, unless it's connected to corporate jargon or mergers and acquisitions. And by the way, that's where most investors come from. It's management consulting or corporate finance. They have zero experience in your field. So one of the things that I often see people miss out on is building a common connection. It needs to be that, oh yeah, I have seen that. That has been a thing that I'm aware of or has affected people in my life or even me personally. Legible ideas are understood by people who know zero about your business. So the clarity of your idea can go a long way. These are the questions that you need to ask for, or sorry, you need to answer within your presentation, especially kind of at the first 30 seconds. This is where you're going to hook people and grab them. What are you making? What's the problem? Who's the customer? This is so important because most people don't get that. And I don't understand why they try to overdo it with the problem statement. It's so much simpler than that. You need a high level concept. So trying to keep everything super clear. Don't go into the technology. Don't go into the why. Don't go into the how. It's basically, yeah, it works. It's like a kick the tire type thing. So the high concept is a oversimplification of what your startup does. So a couple quick examples. Jaws in space. So like the Airbnb of whatever. I don't love those, but like Jaws in space is alien. So people are like, oh yeah, no, I know. I'm really a bus with a bomb, and you immediately know it's Speed. It's a great movie to watch when you're hungover on a Sunday. Or water dinosaur versus giant gorilla. Like, okay, cool. Yeah, Godzilla versus Kong, whatever. So there's lots of examples out there, people who do an amazing job with high concepts and those that are maybe they could still use some work. So I've fielded a handful of these and I've linked to the pitch decks. I'm not going to read that one because I'm running out of time. This is a health tech one that was actually acquired. Good for them. One of my favorites, Dropbox. Dropbox synchronizes files across your team's computers. It's not even perfectly grammatically correct, but it's like, okay, yeah, I get what you guys do. Maybe another would be Airbnb. Airbnb is the first online marketplace that lets travelers book rooms with locals instead of hotels. I think if you fix your high level concept, you're going to get people to pay attention for longer within your presentation than if you do anything else. It's so hard sometimes to be like, what are we actually making? Right? What is, throw in the word actually. What are we actually making? What is that problem that's being solved by what we're making? And who's the person that benefits the most from what we're making? This was the first version of my high level concept for Architecture Quote, which was my AI platform for deal flow for architects. Disaster. I'm not even going to read it. This was my second attempt, a little shorter, but again, like if you're looking at this, you're spacing out. I am, and I wrote the thing. And this is a much shorter version, using AI to help ambitious architecture firms discover and win more projects automatically. That's a lot more smooth than what I originally started with. And it takes time. It iterates. It's something that you'll try out, try on, see if it's good, and then ultimately shift a bunch of times. That's what it's all about. So what does good look like? So there's tons of funded startups. I've linked to them at the beginning of the presentation. Please don't fight that. I'm just the messenger. Last couple of things, because I know I'm running out of time. I think I'm down to like the last 6 minutes here, but clear, concise, and compelling. This is how you figure out the game. This is what most decks include is one slide for each of these main points. You have a cover, company purpose, problem solution, why now, market size, competition, product, business model, teams, the financial, and ask. And sometimes you'll go out of order. That is not necessarily the only order that you can go in. You have to decide that. This is as simple as it gets, the cover image and go through any other well-known accepted pitch deck that got funding, they all start with a cover image. And in many cases, they're putting their websites and contact details because founders are lazy. And I've definitely talked to founders that are like, I don't know, I opened up a Drive document and then I closed the email and I don't know. It was a good pitch deck. I just got too lazy to like figure out where I could find those guys by searching in my email. So like I just didn't reach out. And it's like, dude, that's your life. Like that's incredible. So throw the contact details on there. Problem is one of the things that most people don't actually acknowledge. Is it a real problem? Most problems are popular, growing, urgent, expensive, mandatory, and common. People understand it right away. It's real, it's simple, it's relatable. So if you don't have a problem because maybe you're making coffee and it's like problem is not enough my coffee getting sold, then maybe it's not a huge problem statement. That's a different business overall, but most good decks have a problem. The solution, show, don't tell. Most people end up putting some form of a visual representation of how this actually fixes the problem, not features, it's benefits all day long. So it's a depiction of how this actually solves the problem or how it works. I see a lot of apps that are inside of the screen and inside of the device as well. Go for it. Why not? The why now is super important. This is where you throw some data in or any historical trends or revolution. Jesus. Historical evolution, trends, and scalability. Lots of different ways to do that. I'm going to move past that. Market size, total addressable market first and global market second. But honestly, they're really looking for like how many people are affected by this and how many people could potentially be within your real wheelhouse of selling. Who are your customers and how many of those will you get and what locations are you going after? This is data, numbers, and most people understand that. And you can see that like there's no full sentences on any of these. And you can have multiple slides to demonstrate this, where it's affecting multiple areas, data, 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 data. Don't write full sentences. I'll say it again. Don't write full sentences, especially when you're making numbers about your total addressable market. It is so important to keep it as simple as possible. Traction, anything you can show that shows any type of movement, that's sales, retention, letters of intent, LOIs, number of users, number of active users, number of reoccurring users, news coverage. Drop a press release or ask me how to do one. I'll get you on Yahoo Finance, Google, and a handful of other places, and it won't cost you an arm and a leg. Money raised so far, personal investments, integrations, if you have any traffic, accelerator completion, have you done your MVP? Anything, honestly. Like mom said, it was great. I realize, especially with early stage startups, it's super difficult to do that, but I digress. Technology. If you have a patent pending, which means all you have to do is fill out the application, you don't have to submit. Are you using some new technology? People are like, oh, yeah, blockchain. Oh, okay. It's crazy how many blockchain. If you are involved in Web3 or blockchain, please connect with me after this. There's so many different things I'd love to chat about. Competition, know your market. I've had so many questions and seen so many investors that give up on somebody because they're like, yeah, we don't have anybody who's competing. And it's like, well, it's not really true. It sounds good, but it actually doesn't sound good to investors. It means you haven't done your research. And this is where you kind of pair in your value proposition, which is your unfair advantage, your big differentiators, and any customer stories if you got them. And this is where you can really kill it. Your unfair advantage usually is your founders, or if you've found a way to already capture part of the market, or you have a huge community, or you have this very unique solution within the product, or your acquisition cost is next to nothing because you have an awesome partnership or something really unique. It's monopoly. I know I'm running out of time. Damn, I thought I could get through all of it, but I want to save like a few minutes for questions. So yeah, what kind of questions do we have? How much time do I have actually? Anybody? Am I still on? I got a few minutes. Okay, thanks. I'm gonna finish up then. I figure why not. This was one of the common questions that I had immediately not understood why investors were trying to ask this in so many different ways. You got to pick one. Even if you have a business that has like multiple audiences and it's kind of like B2B to C, you're still not going to win over investors. They want to see one very clear, succinct business model, which means how are you going to make money? Show me super clearly what you're going to do with my money in order to make me more money. That's realistically what this game is. Show me how you're going to make me money by me giving you money, which is just, I mean, that's what this is. It's investors. So I try to look at the market size and some of the cost economics as well as the net cash burn, which leads me to revenue projections. And this is super detailed. There's lots of calculators. There's more than 10 different ways to do valuations, and that's at the low kind of estimation. Most investors expect usually a 1 to 3 years. You could do 1 to 5, but like, who's really counting? Often, if you're trying to set projections, your first year you're going to do 178%, your second year is 100%, your third year is 71%. Most people think it's in reverse, but let's say you sell $50 this month. If you sell $100 next month worth of supplies, service, whatever, then you've doubled your revenue. So that's kind of the concept to bear in mind. The team, this isn't really a problem for people in the US, but it's definitely sometimes a European issue. Smile in your pictures. Like, show a human element. It's so weird to see people with like fucking prison photos where it's like, what are you guys doing? Like, be happy to be there unless you're like a really serious thing, like maybe you're in cybersecurity, but still, like, a smile goes a long way. People want to buy from people they like, and when people are looking like they're, yeah, in a prison photo, it doesn't work. Cool. The ask, how much you looking for? How much money do you want? You normally need to set aside a runway of 12 to 18 months. It's super important. So that means the average investment size, and I know this is kind of counterintuitive, but this is for EU rounds, which are probably about, I think it's about 40% lower or smaller than US. So the average investment size for a pre-seed investment is $386,000. That's supposed to last somebody 6 months to a year, which is fair enough. The median is 150K and the top quartile is 410K. Like, in the US, you're expecting way more than that, to be totally honest. You can do some Google searches to find how much it's actually worth, but yeah, really depends on your niche and the segment. But yeah, a few more quick thoughts. Timelines. Most people are like, dude, I just need to keep things going for another like 3, 4 weeks. The funding's going to come in, everything's going to be great. And it's like, cool. So, like, the average timeline for getting pre-seed funding when you're actually focused on it on a nearly full-time basis, 12 weeks. It's going to take you, it's going to take you 3, 4 months. Like, be honest with yourself. Upper quartile, 19 weeks. It does not happen overnight. Do not expect that, which is frustrating from the founder level, but I understand they're committing a lot of money to what you're trying to build. The order of the pitch deck can change. You can iterate. I create different versions depending on how long I have. I test my deck against people that are not familiar with my space, who I am. It works really well if you're pitching to like the kind of dim-witted cousin, uncle, even grandparents. The non-industry friends, give them the entire pitch and then be like, tell me what I do. And whatever they say in return, if it's kind of like even remotely close, it's like, all right, fuck it, that's what we do. You need to do that too, because it's the simplest, easiest, most kind of distilled version of somebody who's not in the know giving it right back to you. And that's what you need to convey to the audience. And yeah, that's the exact same point. Tell me what my company does. I revise my pitch deck all the time. You're going to find that you're going to have close to 10 different versions of it, and you're going to find that certain things work better than others. I found that the questions that I repeatedly get from investors or at events is probably what's unclear with my deck. And practice makes perfect on this stuff. Again, if you woke me out of a drunken stupor at 3 in the morning, I would be able to go backwards and forwards through my deck because I practiced so much. It's so important to do this. That way, it's no surprise. You could do it without the slides if you really needed to. And most people are like, yeah, no, I've done it a couple of times. It's like, cool, then why are you reading? Like, what's going on? I find, and this is the last couple of things, don't get defensive. I always see the super defensive founders. It's normally a founder that's a little older. Just, it is what it is. But they take a negative question as an attack, where it's like, well, how come you guys haven't made any money? Your answer should be a redirection. So, well, it's funny you mentioned that. So, like, we're really excited about this new feature that actually allows us to really start banking on some of the people that have been eager to get into our platform. I'm not saying because nobody's willing to buy my product. I'm talking about something I want to talk about, which is how awesome this next feature is that we're rolling out in beta. So that needs to be on kind of the top of mind when you're getting asked questions. I always try to do that's a great question in order to buy yourself the first like second to second and a half to think about it. Go for it. In closing, mindset is super important. The resources I've included in this deck, connect with me on LinkedIn if you like it. There are so many different ways to find investors, and reaching out is pretty straightforward based off of what I've shown you. Just pick up some of those tools, and this is kind of the basis for how you do your pitch deck. Little more about me. If you liked any of my stuff or my delivery, or you hated me, that's fine too. You can go to growthsecrets.org. Clintmarketing.com is my agency, but you can also check me out on Near Nordic. I'm building an accelerator. Super excited about that. And that is it for me. I do want to quickly show, if my screen's still up, which it appears to be. Let me just show how people can find investor lists. I have a few 100,000 like rows of investors. So I do site colon docs.google.com and then type in investor or whatever your niche is, and you'll start finding like, oh shit, there's an investor deck right there with 1,000 rows. Lots of different ways to do it, but also people share these at scale on LinkedIn. The hard part is not finding a list of investors. The hard part is getting the meetings. Like it's so crazy. Like, oh, you have investor lists, and it's like, yeah, but it doesn't mean that like I open the door and they're sitting in front of me. Like it's work to actually get them to have that meeting. So cool. I hope that was valuable. I hope you guys understood where I was going. I wanted to get it all in before I ran out of time. So that is me. Well, if the next speaker isn't here, does anybody have any? Ah, there he is. What's up, man?
How's it? Thank you so much. That was awesome. I always love your energy and how authentic and raw you are. So
Thanks, man.
that was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. We have a few questions. It looks like we have a few minutes, if you don't mind, for
Mm-hmm.
me to ask them to you. So, got a question from Greg. He is asking, any thoughts from Taylor, speakers, and others on the accelerators like Techstars? Is this a dog and pony show, heavy on pitching, raising, and low on actually putting a business together and scale?
For sure. Yeah. So I have my challenges with Y Combinator, Techstars. Like there's a really interesting number of papers that have come out that show that early stage funds or first time funds, venture capital funds, as well as accelerators, tend to perform better overall because they take more chances, they risk more. I've gotten two different companies that have gone through, and it's so bizarre the way that Y Combinator does it, where they basically review your decks and stuff, and then they agree to kind of set a time, and then they ask you to pitch for 3 or 4 minutes over the phone, and then if you don't get a call back in 15 minutes, like, go fuck yourself. It's the weirdest thing where it's like, who's that like bougie? But what they're looking for, and it's the same with plug and play and some of these other accelerators that are very well known, is they're looking for safe investments that are already generating revenue. So if you don't have 10,000 monthly recurring revenue USD, they don't care. That you're not interesting to them. So that means these really well-known, amazing, world-renowned accelerators are extremely competitive to get into because they're focused on people that are basically nearly a home run over the fence already. And that, in most cases, is not you and most startups that I know. Otherwise, why would you do it? So I've also had a lot of back and forth with some people in accelerators that are running successful accelerators. If you were doing really, really well and you knew your shit and you were a good entrepreneur, probably don't need an accelerator. So something to bear in mind. I do think that there's a lot of really interesting learning opportunities, but the biggest players is not necessarily where you get the best jams. You go for the network. But yeah, I can tell we're running low on time, right?
Yeah, that was great. It looks like our next speaker's here, so we're gonna cut the questions early. Thank you so much again for joining us. If you don't mind, one
Sure.
more time sharing with everyone where they can find you online, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, just so they can connect with you.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for asking. So I am the only Taylor Ryan in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I can tell I can't share my screen, but if you look up Taylor Ryan or you can share it in the chat, that would be awesome. And I'm also at Clint, Klint, marketing.com. And you can check out my masterclass on growthsecrets.org. Or if you're in the Web3 space, please let's connect. And you can go to near, Near, Nordic.com. But easiest way is connect with me on LinkedIn.